All right, good afternoon. We are so glad that you could be joining us here at the 2020 ICSC conference. We're so honored that we get to be here together. My name is Rebecca Buckingham, and I get to work with Generis, who is going to be presenting this session titled Stabilize Your Parish, Sustained Giving in an Economic Downturn. So we're so glad that you're joining us here, wherever you're joining from. As a reminder, we're going to be using the Zoom platform. And so I know that you're watching from the Whova platform where you see your chat screen on your right, but we're going to be utilizing the Zoom chat screen and the Zoom Q&A feature. So if you have any questions or anything in the chat section, go ahead and put that on the Zoom platform. And so while we get started, I'm going to go ahead and pray our conference prayer. And so feel free to join with me, and I'm going to pray over our time together. Gracious and loving God, we gather in your name to draw from a wellspring of wisdom that will enrich our lives and the lives of those we love and serve. Through this networking, sharing of ideas, and discernment, though, lift us up. Open our eyes, lead us into an encounter with your Son on higher ground where we will be drawn to moments of epiphany, deeper self-awareness, and profound grace. In these times of uncertainty and stress, do not abandon us, but pour out your Spirit upon us so that its power becomes our power. Make us good stewards of what we take away from here and inspire us to proclaim the gospel without shame, offer hope to others, and give glory to you in every word we speak and action we take. We pray this through your Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you so much again for joining us here at the Generis session entitled Stabilize Your Parish, Sustained Giving in an Economic Downturn. Again, my name is Rebecca Buckingham. I get to work at Generis with these amazing colleagues here. We have Craig Lascauzo, Derek Hazlett, and Steve McSwain. I'm just going to read a quick intro about each of them, and then we're going to get started. So first up, we have Craig Lascauzo. He brings 30 years of ministerial experience to the role of helping parishes accelerate generosity toward their God-inspired vision. He has a pastor's heart, a leadership vision, and understands what is needed to create a culture of generosity in a local parish. He brings the experience of having sat in the pastor's chair during all phases of a capital campaign. So this unique sensitivity serves Craig as well as he helps pastors navigate their churches through successful campaigns. Welcome, Craig. We also have Derek Hazlett. Derek has over 25 years of experience leading in ministry and business environments. He's held roles in senior leadership as well as with pioneering different ventures. In addition to Derek's direct coaching relationships with church leaders, he also served in an executive leadership capacity at one of the fastest growing churches in the country and held numerous leadership positions at a Fortune 500 retail company. Derek's unique combination of business and local church experience fuels his passion to see churches and organizations realize their full potential through the shepherding of their people and stewarding of their resources. Welcome, Derek. And then we have Steve McSwain. Steve McSwain is a celebrated generosity strategist with Catholic, evangelical, and Protestant congregations across America. Having provided generosity and lead counsel in hundreds of annual and capital campaigns coast to coast, Steve has successfully navigated congregational generosity initiatives, enabling parishes, dioceses, and Christian schools to collectively raise nearly $500 million for worthy causes worldwide. Steve has devoted his adult life to serving the church and guiding Christ followers toward transformational spiritual growth in generosity. Welcome, Steve. We're so glad that y'all are here. And thank you again for joining us here at the ICSC conference. And as a reminder, before we get started, go ahead and if you look at your Whova screen on the right side, you'll see the chat bar, but we're going to be using the Zoom chat and the Zoom Q&A feature. So if you have any questions throughout our time together, go ahead and put them in the Q&A and in the chat feature so we can take care of them that way. So with that, I now turn the virtual podium over to you, Steve McSwain.
Thank you, Rebecca. And thank you for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you online with us. And we hope this will be beneficial and applicable to your particular situation. So we're talking about stabilizing the parish and preparing for what might be an economic downturn. If we've learned anything through this health crisis, is that there's a lot of uncertainty. And whenever there's uncertainty, That creates the feeling that we're kind of out of control, and we're anxious and we're fearful, and that then spills over into the economy. So when the pandemic first appeared, everybody kind of thought this thing would be over in a few weeks. That's what we were looking for. And now here we are 6 months into this, and no end in sight, at least that anybody can predict with any measurable accuracy. We don't know how long this thing's going to stick around. So we are anticipating it's going to have an impact, if it's not already having an impact. When parishes then shut down because of the mandates and the stay-at-home measures, the biggest fear people had then was, well, the coffers, they're going to suffer. We're not going to have enough money to operate. But what we discovered is that it wasn't quite as bad as we thought it was going to be. At least, some of the faithful givers stepped up to the plate, kind of picked up what we were losing in plate offerings when we were not meeting together regularly. So now here we are. We're back to wherever you're located, meeting occasionally, maybe 1 or 2 masses a weekend, could be more, could be less, depending on your situation and how the COVID is going in your region. But be that as it may, we're still not back to where we were pre-pandemic. And so we're worried. A lot of people are. Are we going to survive this? How are we going to manage? And so here we are today, wondering what next steps we need to take. And we hope to be able to offer you a few suggestions. Now, if you go to the next slide, I wanted you to see kind of what, go to the next one after that, Rebecca. This is kind of where it stands to now with many of the churches across America. This is from stateoftheplate.info. About 8% of the churches are actually reporting that their giving now, 6-7 months into this pandemic, is up, if you can believe that. But that's what many, a number of churches are reporting. About 30% are finding themselves sort of steady. It's not perfect. It's not good. But, they're kind of holding their own. And the rest, about 65%, are reporting a downturn in giving. So while some people thought we would have a V-shaped economic recovery, that is, we dropped and we're going to bounce right back, most economists now believe that it's going to be more like a K-shaped recovery. It's going to be longer. There are people at the very top that have done pretty well through this. There's a big swath of folks right in the middle that are just surviving, like parishes. And then there are people that are really struggling through this. So we're anticipating the longer this goes on, the more of an economic impact it's going to have on parishes, and parishes need to get ready for it. So that's the whole point of today's lesson on stabilizing the parish. Just as cars have stabilizers in the suspension system and airplanes have stabilizers to keep the airplane in the sky, so churches need stabilizers. So I'm going to give you about 6 here that we'll talk about, maybe 7. And then I'm going to invite Craig and Derek to jump in anywhere they'd like, but at the end they'll, I know, have things that they'll like to add to what I'm going to share. So the first thing I would suggest is that you stay positive and that you stay optimistic. An optimist is somebody that can see an opportunity in every difficulty. But, and it's kind of hard in these times to be optimistic about much of anything. But it's really important in church life and in our parish operations that we keep a positive spirit through this, because people are tired. Our staffs in parishes and in our dioceses are tired. They're frustrated and struggling, and we're all sort of trying to pivot. And I know we're even tired of the word pivot, to adjust to the new realities that we're in. So it's going to be real important going forward that we not blame the economy on our declining revenues, if that's the case where your parish may be, but that we get real proactive and do the best we can to keep an optimism through it all. So that's the first thing. Be optimistic, stay positive. Number two, contact and communicate with your stakeholders. Now, who are these people? Well, these are those in your parish that give $300 to $500 or more per annum. That is, every year you can count on these people to give at least $300 to $500 or more to the annual offertory. You say, well, that's just about everybody. Not exactly. There are really two ways of measuring the spiritual maturity of the parishioners when it comes to generosity. And I want to mention a couple of these. I won't go into them at great length, but if you would like to talk sometime offline about either one of these and how both work in concert with each other, then you can contact any one of us, Craig, Derek, or me, and we'll be happy to explore this with you. But for our purposes today, let me just mention these two measurement factors, metrics that we talk about to sort of help you assess where people are in terms of their spiritual growth around the area of generosity in your parish. Number one, it's the actual number of giving households, not the number of members of your household, but the number of your parish, but the number of giving households, and they're not ever the same. And the second is the average gift per household. Now, I've been in this work with parishes for a long time, and I would say that this is probably true in every place I've been, and that's from coast to coast. In almost every parish, there's about 30 to 50%, almost half in many parishes, of the parishioners of the parish households who have no record of giving anything. This is true in any place. I've not seen any exception to this. I was working with one of our local parishes here, and we just finished a capital campaign, St. Raphael, the Archangel, not very far from my home here. And we just 2 Sundays ago celebrated their commitment weekend. And yes, that means right smack in the middle of this pandemic, we've been in a capital campaign. It interrupted us to the degree that we kind of had to put everything on hold for 3 or 4 months there while we were in these stay-at-home measures. But about June, middle of June, we cranked it back up and we just completed it. And their goal was to raise $3 million. They're right now at just a little bit over $3 million. And we have a couple more Sundays during the commitment period to go. So we're very hopeful that they will not only will have succeeded in reaching their goal, but will have exceeded it as well. But when I was originally talking to them, I asked them about how many households do you have in the parish? And they said, we got 900 plus households. And then I said, well, let's talk about the giving households. And that was a different kind of number. And the more we explored, the more I discovered there the same thing that I find in most parishes. And that is that you have about 90 to 95% of your total revenue in almost any parish coming from, generally speaking, what I would call the stakeholders. It's that group that gives you $300 to $500 or more per annum. So if I were working with your parish, or any one of us were working with your parish, we could do this kind of analysis, if you don't have those kinds of tools available to you, to help you discern who are those people that make up that group, and how then should we communicate with them. So what I'm suggesting is that you figure out who these stakeholders are, and then you can subdivide those into 3 groups, because you need to communicate with all of them. Number one, make a personal call to each of those that make up the top 10% of those giving households. Now, this is very important. In fact, this would be the place where the priest himself ought to plug in to this process of just checking on these people, seeing how they're doing, asking about their family, thanking them for their support, and encouraging them to continue their faithfulness as you move forward. That's one group. A second group is that big group in the middle, those folks that make up the rest. They need to be personally contacted, and probably depending on the size of your parish, you're going to have to do this by mail, but talk to them, regularly communicate with them. If you use the electronic means of doing so, do that. But if you don't use that strongly, then send a letter. But don't let this just be a dear member kind of letter. Personalize it. Dear Bob and Mary, talk about ministry impact. Thank them for their support through this season. Tell them the ministry impact the parish is having. This is what people need to hear. They don't need to be reminded so much about what they're giving. They need to know how their giving is making a difference in the lives of people in the parish and through the parish in the community. So talk about that and highlight it, and then tell them what's coming and how we're preparing for the future and whatever shape that takes, both economically and in terms of ministry impact in the community. So it's very, very important that you contact and communicate with your stakeholders and keep them affirmed for their support going forward. Number 3, it's going to be real important in order to stabilize your parish and prepare for whatever the economic conditions are in the future, that you create multiple offertory budget scenarios. Now, most of the Catholic churches I've worked with over the years operate on a fiscal budget year and not a calendar year. I don't know how it is with your particular parish, but for many of these parishes that do fiscal year budgeting and planning, well, sometime after the first of the new year, they will begin meeting and planning for the coming budget promotion year. So the question this next budget planning year is likely going to be, how has the pandemic impacted us? Number 2, how long will it continue to impact us? These will be the questions that the Finance Council will be dealing with. And number 3, do we need to cut back on our budget? If this is going to be a long-term recovery that we're going to be dealing with for quite some time, how well have we done so far? How well do we anticipate doing? And how are we going to then move forward? So for the wise parish, it will be very important for the Finance Council then to develop 3 particular budgets. A kind of best case scenario budget, a kind of worst case scenario budget, and then what we could call a something in between kind of budget. And if you're looking for help in just how to do this, of course, again, we'd be more than happy to give you counsel and guidance on it. And we actually even have an ebook that's free for you to download. If you'll just go to Generis sometime after this call, generis.com/Steve-McSwain. It'll take you to my landing page there at the Generis website, and you will, as you scroll down, see plenty of free downloadable ebooks and resources. And one of them is called, what's it called, gentlemen?
Stabilize, or the
Stabilize, that's one resource. There's another couple of good resources. I've mentioned one in the notes, and that's the Forward Focus Framework. We actually provide in that little ebook the very thing I'm talking about now in terms of some guidance on creating these 3 potential budgets for the coming new year. So take a look at that kind of thing, download these resources, and utilize them in your own particular situation. Number 4, reconnect regularly with your parish mission and vision. Now, this is real important, particularly for the Finance Council in developing the new budget, because what a lot of councils will be tempted to do is just give an across-the-board cut because maybe declining revenues have dictated it, that we're just not meeting budget this year because of the pandemic. We're not anticipating it being a whole lot different next year. So we better just give an across the board cut of 10%. And that's probably not the best way to establish next year's budget, which is why I'm suggesting in point number 4 here that you connect it back to your church's mission and vision. Every parish has a church mission. You usually can find that on their landing page of the website for that parish. Most mission statements are entirely too long. They often need to be shortened, but everybody knows what a mission statement is. It sort of articulates the overarching mission and purpose of that parish. And that's a little different from vision. I use the word vision to be more time-bound, specific, narrow-focused in what we're trying to accomplish now on the basis of our mission. So what I'm suggesting is your finance council needs to go back and kind of reaffirm the mission of the parish in light of the pandemic. What can we do going forward? What do we need to fund? What can be tabled or unfunded? Because given the realities that we're living in, it's not something that we can do and do successfully. So where should we be investing our resources going forward? That's the kind of thing that I'm suggesting needs to take place in your parish when it comes to establishing the budget and the plans going forward. Number 5 is the question, is giving a metric of spiritual growth? Now, you would expect that I believe this, that it is, but I'm saying it's important for our parishes and our leaders to decide, what do we really believe about generosity and giving? I've been amazed at the 25 years since I've been in this at how frequently I kind of run into the blank stares whenever I ask the question, what is your church's particular belief system around giving? St. Paul said in 2 Corinthians 8:7 that while we may excel in every area of life, the one area that we often do not excel in terms of our spiritual growth, is in the area of giving. So when he was writing the Corinthians, he made mention of the Macedonian Christians in another region that he helped cultivate and start their church and watch their growth in giving. And he was encouraging them in the Corinthian church to sort of model that level of generosity and make a resolve, a commitment to grow spiritually in the grace of giving. Now, if we don't do that, then it's real difficult for us to normalize the conversation around money in church, which is why over the years, we've almost created this culture of silence about giving in our parishes. And so that the only time people ever hear about money in church is when we need it. And so we've made this huge disconnect often between how we live out our Catholic faith and what we personally believe about giving. We think giving is a real personal decision, while everything else may be a spiritual decision. And nothing could be more contrary to both our church's teaching and to the teaching of the New Testament. So I push on this point hard because I think it's very important for churches to tie their generosity platform to their understanding and their belief and their convictions around generosity and growth in spiritual giving with regard to generosity. I have a little quote there. You can see that to the degree you know what you believe about giving or generosity, and you have integrated those beliefs into your own DNA, to that degree will you feel comfortable talking to others about money and giving. And to the degree, conversely, you've not done that, that sort of unveils the uncomfortableness that we have in our churches and a lot of the ambiguity around giving. So it needs to get real crystal clear. And then number 6, know your giving households. If you want to really stabilize your parish, you need to know and encourage growth in giving year round. So in a lot of places, I like to ask 3 or 4 questions when it comes to knowing your giving households. And one of those questions is, who are your first-time givers? When a person comes to your parish and begins to attend Mass, and then after a few maybe weekends of attending, they make their first gift, I liken that to somebody that's been kind of standing on the side of a pool, looking at the deep end and thinking, do I really want to jump in there? And then they sort of put their toe in to the deep end to see, okay, how cold is it here? How warm is it? And then they take the leap. And when somebody makes their first time gift to your parish, it's kind of like jumping into the deep end. They're saying there's something important going on here. It's moving me. It's inspiring me. And they make their first response. So when that happens in your parish, who knows that? Who knows when that first gift is made? And secondly, what happens then? Now, in a lot of places where there's at least a little progress in these areas, usually when I ask that question, I get the deer in the headlights response. And finally, somebody will say, well, our bookkeeper knows, as of course he or she should know, when that person or household's made their first gift. But shouldn't somebody else know? And shouldn't there be a more personal response? If you want to encourage a second gift, then a third gift, and move that person to their fourth gift, after which, when a person has made their fourth gift to your parish, they're considered a regular contributor. But how do you get them to that point? Well, you begin by acknowledging the first gift, making it personal, thanking them, and not just with a form letter, but something really personal. I encourage priests to do this. The first gift that's made, the priest makes the contact. Hey, Bob and Mary, just wanted you to know I appreciate the fact that you've been coming to our masses, and thank you for this gift you've made. I mean, can you imagine somebody getting a personal call from the priest himself, thanking them for their gift? So that's one question. When I talk about knowing your giving households, who are the first-time givers? Secondly, who are your regular givers? Now, I've already established that when I asked moments ago about the stakeholders. You need a process. You need a system. Some church management systems can help you do this. We have a church analytics platform. Derek might want to speak to that in a minute. That enables churches to sort of look real closely at what's kind of happening with the donors in their circle of influence. So who are these regular givers, these stakeholders, and you know who they are? Thirdly, whose regular giving among the regular givers has taken a new spike upward? Now, I think this is an important question because, if a family's been giving you $100, let's say, a month, and they've been doing that for years, and then all of a sudden, you get a gift from them for $5,000, again, who notices that? And what's the natural response? I can assure you that when somebody has that kind of spike in their giving, out of the blue, one Sunday, they go back the next week, the next period of when they give to that regular pattern that they've established. There's a story, though, around that special gift. And sometimes that's a story that's worth sharing. But how would you know if there's not somebody watching this, knowing this, letting the priest know if he's not aware, so that there, again, can be a personal touch, a personal contact with that family. And then, and this is a very important question, who has lapsed in his or her giving? And when that happens, what happens? So when Bob and Mary have been giving you $100 a month and have been doing that for years and years, suddenly a couple of months pass and they've made no gift, who would know this? And what's the response of the parish? Parish leadership. Usually nothing happens, and it's not until after that person is long gone and they've gone to some other church in the community or they've quit going altogether, because generally when somebody has a change in their pattern of giving or their giving is lapsed, there's a problem there that could be a spiritual opportunity. There's a need there that could be a chance to reach out in Christian love and find out what's going on with that parishioner, that parish family. So the bottom line of what I'm trying to say here is, who in your parish is monitoring any of these realities I'm describing? It's all very important. If you want to stabilize your parish and secure giving and then build on that so that your growth can continue in spite of the economic setbacks, these are practices you have to put in place. Now, Craig and Derek, what have I left out here that ought to be mentioned?
Great job there, Steve.
Now, feel free to jump in, or let's take questions from our audience. We may have some questions that.
Steve, can I add a couple of thoughts?
Yes, please.
The question around giving being a metric of spiritual growth is so important.
Mm-hmm.
But I think even if not, or we don't have a fully developed kind of theological view around that,
Mm-hmm.
At least it's an engagement metric.
Yeah.
And something, as you described in kind of that sixth tip, that is really important for us to consider, and that especially in the season that we're in, this really is the only tangible engagement metric that I have. It's one thing to be able to look out in the crowd at Mass and see who people are, and if they're involved in some other kind of activity. Those are things we can maybe in a normal, whatever that means now, season, be able to track and follow through on. But right now, giving, we know every time, every person, everything about that. And so that's a real metric of kind of who's part of your core, who's retaining through this season, who's staying connected. And to that end, as we're thinking in terms of kind of these of new giving and even lapsed or lagging giving, I'm encouraging churches and parishes right now to think about each of those segments that you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe my larger givers, my top 10%, begin to evaluate in this season, if they're year-end givers, are they still around? If I only see giving once a year or more infrequently, what do I know about those folks? Are they still with us? Are they still tuning in? Are they still trying to come as often as they can? That kind of thing. I'm also looking at this group of people that gave between January and March of this year. That had some frequency and some regularity, but then I haven't seen anything from them since we started flattening the curve for 15 days 6 months ago. So, so if they were active in January, February, and March, but then they dropped off after March 15th, what's going on? Are they okay? Are they economically, are things okay? What might be happening in their lives? And then the third group, and this goes back to your communication discussion and kind of how we're thinking about the way we communicate. What about that group that has stayed with you, right? And so the most active current core of your church are those who have been continuing to give March, April, May, June, July, August, September. And that group is, and the new people that are coming in this season is a really engaged and important constituency that's going to carry your parish forward. But they got to hear from us. They've got to hear from us. And so that was kind of one of the first thoughts that came to mind as you were talking, Steve.
Hey, Steve, and Irene Lindemeyer asked the question to clarify. You mentioned $300 to $500. Is that annually or monthly? Why don't you expand on that a little bit for her? You're muted, Steve. Steve, you're muted.
Yeah, thank you. The technology, I'm still learning how to do this. Yeah, that's a good question. I've been in parish work a long time, and I don't think there's an exception to this, but in almost every, well, there probably is an exception to everything, but most of them I've worked with, there's anywhere from 40 to 60% of your membership in that parish that give you $300 to $500 or more annually. And that's kind of that group I'm talking about, that typically give you about 90 to 98% of your total revenue. if you were to sit down and sort of analyze this case by case in your own parish, which is a little, that's a real challenging kind of process, which is why tools like Church Analytics, which is a tool that our firm uses with a lot of parishes, and you can find out more about that right at the website. But it's a tool to help you sort of assimilate that information, that giving data. And what I've discovered is that group in almost every parish I've ever worked with, 95% is kind of where that number is of your total revenue comes from that group, between 40 and 60%. So sometimes when churches, I ask them, well, how much, how many households do you have? Because if they're going to do a capital campaign, they're always, well, we got 900 households, we ought to be able to do this. But then when you look under the hood and see what's going on inside the engine a little bit, you discover that it's significantly fewer than that who are actually giving the lion's share of support to that church. So that's what I meant. Didn't mean to take that long in answering the question, but that's what I mean by the 300 to 500.
Very helpful.
Any other questions?
Hey, Derek, why don't you talk a little bit about what's feasible and possible as it relates to the data. Data is so important. Data often drives a lot of how we figure out what we're going to do. And Church Analytics, not just the platform, but the concept of how that data helps us to make decisions.
Yeah, Craig, that's a great point. I think there are some limitations to how different data visualization tools, how accessible those are to certain platforms. Not all platforms play well with others, but if you are in a parish that has that's using CCB or a Realm, which is an ACS product, or Fellowship One, or there are several like that. You can reach out to me related to what those might be. But even if you don't have access to a report writing tool or a report visualization tool, the questions that Steve asked are really the questions we need to be asking as parishes. And that is what is the condition of our givers, and are we looking at giving through the lens of engagement? If it's just one person on the finance team or the bookkeeper that's looking at this, then I'm missing an opportunity to welcome people in and help them grow and deepen in their engagement with me. I'm also, to Steve's point, I'm missing opportunities on those that are starting to lapse or lag. And that was one of the frustrating things about being in ministry, is I many times don't know something's wrong until they've left, or it's metastasized. Even sitting down sometimes with people that are going through a marital situation, so many times I wish they would have come to me 6 months ago or a year ago, and now they're asking me to help them fix it. And I'm like, where were you when there was something to work with? And I think it's similar to how, when we think in terms of of the body of Christ, it's expressed in our local parishes. We have some information that's telling us that we can act on, and it's giving as a leading indicator when somebody is starting to leave. And so by the time I notice, especially in a season like this, by the time I notice, it's probably physically, they're down the road. And similarly, it's a lagging indicator on the way in, as Steve articulated. When they give that gift, there's something going on. It's a high spiritual moment, and they're cashing in. They're saying, I'm connecting here, but that's not their first thing they've done. They've been attending. They've been experiencing the impact on their children or the community. And so measuring that, monitoring it is important. You don't have to watch every single indicator, but I just would strongly encourage us to look beyond the top level of total giving and dig in a little bit to what is the behavior of my givers, because that's a key that can really help indemnify you in an economic downturn, the potential for one. So monitoring my giving, total giving divided by my number of core givers is a great starting point. Looking at those folks that are giving more than 300 to 500, at least 300 to 500, and then segmenting those lists. watching for new people as they're coming in and taking some action on that, monitoring those that are adjusting their giving, it's going up or going down, and then those that are lagging or lapsing. And when they start to lapse, you're about a year, we kind of tend to think of that in a 12-month framework. And those folks are really hard to recover. They're probably have left you. But if I'm paying attention to that in a 90-day increment, then I've got some time to probably warm them back up. Again, our point here is not so much, as Steve mentioned, to try to reactivate giving as much as I'm trying to reactivate engagement. And there's typically some other spiritual dynamic going on in there, and that's why we're in this work. That's why we were called to this work. And so I think monitoring just a handful of those, then we can get more sophisticated over time. As you're starting to look at this, then you can start to ask questions like, well, gosh, they were a new giver. How many gifts have they given this year? First time we've seen them. Now we're at 3 gifts, 4 gifts. Then we can get more sophisticated related to kind of digging into the nuances by giving bands and those kinds of things. But just starting with who are they and kind of where are they in the cycle? And then taking some steps, Craig, to begin to build out some processes around that say, okay, if we need to kind of keep it cordoned off, I understand not publicizing everybody's giving to everybody, but they don't always have to know what the amount is. But if you were able to provide your parish priest a list of 10 names and you say, these are 10 people that have started to give here, would you reach out to them? The father doesn't have to know all the details. Or if you got a list of 3 or 4 names, hey, these people have taken a really significant jump. Would you reach out to them? That kind of thing can provide some just incredible impact.
Yeah, beautifully stated, Derek. Great. Okay, are there other questions, other additions we should make to this before we wrap this up?
Steve, can you talk briefly about what your thoughts are related to kind of friction to giving? I think one of the things that I'm experiencing or observing with churches and parishes right now is that when we had to go home for a season, we're so heavily reliant on the offering basket or the box, or the plate. Speaking to what maybe a step the church or parish could take to make it easier for me to continue to participate in giving without being there physically or being so.
Well, it's a good question. A lot of parishes have implemented plans to move more and more of their people to online recurring giving. A lot of parishes and parish staffs are doing this. Many people are even people that have been reluctant to do so in the past are beginning to, become more comfortable with that. We're all creatures of habit. And I just realized the other day when I got, my parish still sends envelopes to us in the mail every month. And I got the package in the mail. It's probably been 6 months ago now when this occurred, but it suddenly dawned on me, I haven't been giving that way in probably the last 2 or 3 years. I've been doing it all online. And so I just thought, why haven't I called my own parish and told them, you don't need to be sending me these envelopes anymore. Save yourself the money. And so I took measures to do that. But, it's very important through this season and going forward, not just at budget time, to be continually reminding people of the opportunities to text to give, to set up their own reoccurring program of giving with their bank, and to utilize these tools. I even go so far, Derek and Craig, sometimes to suggest to priests, and this is almost an anathema to some of them, that they take time, even in Mass, on occasion, and educate the people about how to set these things up. We have so isolated the giving moment in most of our Mass and liturgy experience that it's like something we never talk about. We just kind of go through the motions of it, when really we have a wonderful opportunity in the context of the celebration of the Mass itself to speak to how to, especially in this world, how to set up those kind of other avenues of giving and help people, and not just rely on sending letters out and encouragement that way, but to speak directly to people about it and encourage it. Is this kind of what you're?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would add, and that's a great point. These tools are ubiquitous and accessible now. There's really no reason to not have a like you suggest, even a text to give option. Technology's improved so dramatically over the last several years. But I think a good test for our parishes, as you were talking, it made me think of this, is can I give within 10 seconds? And that's really kind of the idea.
Yeah.
About as long as it could take me to reach into my pocket and pull out my wallet, or reach into my purse and pull out my checkbook. Can I reach into my phone, and within 10 seconds of going to that parish website or that app, can I make a gift? And if it takes you longer than that, and I'll just say I'm a part of a church down in Nashville, and it's a nightmare. It takes me. I'm trying to give that way because we're not passing the plate anymore, and I'm trying to give that way. And I almost every time give up and just say I'll do it at home. Now I'm committed to this and to be faithful in giving. But if I'm new to it or learning to, there's a real out of sight, out of mind. So I just encourage you to test that even in your own context. How easy is it really?
Yeah.
Is it understood? Is it understandable? As Steve said, take the time to explain it, but then actually trying to do it. Does the process work?
Yeah, I think Steve, you were right though. It has to be shown.
Yes.
If you think by osmosis, you develop a system of whatever it is, whether it's an app, a text giving through your website. If that's all you do is make that available and even just put it in a newsletter, it's not going to be used. The priest or somebody during a Mass is going to have to take time within the liturgy and actually walk through the process. So the fact is that we have screens and so much, we can do a lot of explaining, but if it's not owned in the Mass, people will not step up to it, I think.
Yeah, good point. That's good. Well, we're coming up on 2:50 in the afternoon, I think, if my watch is correct here. So we're kind of coming down to the end. I don't see any other questions. I did want, if you'll go for just, is there anything, by the way, Derek, you or Craig want to add to what we've already talked about before I jump to this next slide?
No, I think you go ahead because we are getting close to the end.
All right, go to the next slide then, Rebecca. Right after this session, I'm hosting a discussion around Ask Me Anything Generosity, and you can see the link there if you'd like to jump on that call at 3 o'clock. We'll go for 30 minutes or so, or however long the questions might be there. If you have something you'd like to talk to us about specifically, maybe a unique situation that you're facing in your own parish that I could, or one of us could help you with, don't miss jumping on that call for a few minutes and we'll talk to you directly. Listen, thank you for this afternoon, sharing in this session with us from Generis, and we hope this has been somewhat helpful to you. We look forward to the rest of the conference and all the upcoming sessions. So may you have the blessing of God upon your life and your family, keep you safe and in the palm of his hand. So God bless you. Thank you, and we'll see you later.